We're going to be moving on to our next system, and to me this is where the physiology starts getting a little bit more complex. Definitely where the level of the course kind of starts bumping up a little bit, just to kind of give you a fair warning on this. We're going to start talking about the muscles. Really kind of neat things here. The physiology on this is very involved. To me, one of the ones where it starts getting really fun to try to explain some of this stuff, because it's definitely complex and definitely involves a little bit more intricate physiology, which to me is one of my favorite things to discuss a little bit more, is when stuff gets a little bit deeper. I really enjoy talking about, for example, the muscles and the energy systems with the muscles. So what we're going to do again is just remind you a little bit about the different types of muscle, and then we're going to start talking about overall muscle structure as well as the muscle microstructure. That'll be the first few shows of these ones, and then we will work into how do muscles contract and how do we get the energy for that. And then we'll talk a little bit about smooth muscle. We're not going to talk in great detail about cardiac muscle with this one, because we do go into the heart and how the heart contracts in AMP2. We'll do a lot more depth of cardiac muscle at that point. What we will do a little bit more depth here is talk a little bit about how smooth muscle does differ in its contraction from skeletal muscle. So really, what are the different types of muscle that we're going to be worrying about here? Just to remind everybody, three main types of muscle. We have cardiac muscle, found only in the heart; skeletal muscle, which is all that voluntary muscle that we move; and then smooth muscle, which is going to be your involuntary, kind of most of your organ muscle. Your erector pili muscles in the skin are some good examples of that smooth muscle. And it's a nice little chart that kind of reminds you what's voluntary and what's not. So skeletal muscle is the only voluntary muscle that we have. It is what you kind of control when we're thinking about all the different movements we just talked about. Cardiac muscle, like I said, found only in the heart. It is striated, much like skeletal muscle is. We'll get into why those striations exist. It has to do with the microanatomy of the muscle. And then the other type is the smooth muscle, again, found in a lot of your digestive tract, your erector pili muscles, along with other areas that are going to have that smooth muscle in it. Again, this one looks a bit different. These are going to be more, as we'll see in just a minute here, spindle-shaped cells, wider in the center, tapering on the ends. And again, they still have some of those same proteins that make up cardiac and skeletal muscle, but because the organization is a little bit different, we are not going to have those striations. So skeletal muscle, these are going to be the large muscles of the body. We will be doing a lot of looking at some of the anatomy of this as well. These help maintain posture. They help us move. So movements like this would be skeletal muscle, those jointed bones, generally found in antagonistic pairs. So you have one muscle that will do the contraction like that flexion, another muscle that's going to do the extension. Be kind of silly if we got like this and then you couldn't undo it. And these are being held to the bones by the tendons. And these ones, they start out as a bunch of precursor cells that actually fuse together. So these muscle cells can be quite long, in some cases up to 30 centimeters long on your sartorius, which is down in your thigh. These are long cylindrical fibers. They start out, like I said, as separate cells, and these cells and their cytoplasm fuse together. So what we get is this large cylindrical multinucleated cell. And again, those myofibrils that are in this cell, these are things that we'll talk about a little bit on the next one, but just to kind of give you the names of them, actin and myosin, that is those contractile proteins, those myofibrils that are going to make up a good portion of what is inside of the skeletal muscle cell. Again, multinucleated because they come from those stem cells, those myoblasts that fuse together. So if you get these long, non-branching, kind of parallel fibers that have these striations in them. And this kind of shows you how that happens. You get all these myoblasts, and these cells kind of help them do that, and then you get these long, cylindrical, multinucleated cells. Again, not worried about the process, not going to ask you to explain the process of how this happens, but just trying to explain why these cells are multinucleated, because most cells, when you really look at the body, are not. And again, voluntary movements, moves the bones at the joints within the skeleton, and again, multinucleated, striated, non-branching cylindrical fibers. Cardiac muscle, this is found in the heart, two main portions of it in the heart, and kind of generates the upper and lower chambers of the heart. Obviously, we know the heart functioning is critical to us, and cardiac muscle is a little bit different in that what's happening in one muscle cell can influence the other ones. This is not true in skeletal muscle, and we'll get into some of that and why that's the case. The other thing is the heart is always going to contract fully every time it's stimulated to contract. So again, these are branching cells. They're shorter, usually have 1 or 2 nuclei. Again, going to have the striations because those layouts of those fibers are still similar, that they do kind of a lining up like this where you get those light and dark things here. Lots of mitochondria. We're going to see the heart is always going to be aerobic respiration when it comes down to it. We will talk about muscles and how they get their energy. But the main thing is we always keep the heart functioning. We always make sure we have enough oxygen to the heart. And if we don't, that is generally what is going to be a heart attack. Or at least one of the types of a heart attack. What makes heart muscles a little bit different, the cardiac muscle, is these intercalated discs. These are areas with gap junctions. And what this means is what's going on in one cardiac muscle cell can influence the ones that are next to it. The other thing that's interesting about heart muscle and the cardiac muscle is that it is autorhythmic. It can generate its own beat. It stimulates its own contraction. The heart is influenced by the nervous system, but there is not a nerve that's firing that says heart beat, heart beat. It doesn't do that. It's actually a part of the heart that generates that rhythm that we can either kind of turn that up or turn it down a little bit, but it's the autonomic system influencing the normal beat of the heart, not it generating the heartbeat. And again, you can see on these ones, you can see the intercalated disc, the nuclei lit up on these ones. You can also see that these are branching fibers. So again, not long, parallel, unbranching fibers. These are shorter, branching or bifurcated cells that are making a network with one another, usually having a single or a couple of nuclei. And again, the specialized intercalated discs in between each muscle cell, allowing one cell to influence what's going on in all of the cells it's connected to. And this is again kind of showing that. Again, makes the heart function as a unit and not each fiber function kind of as on its own, which is what we will see in skeletal muscle when we talk about that. So some of the differences: cardiac muscle, 1 nuclei, every once in a while 2. Branch cells, they're shorter, have intercalated discs. These cells can be autorhythmic. Skeletal muscle is multinucleated, parallel non-branching cells, much longer, cylindrical, no intercalated discs. And this is anytime a skeletal muscle is going to contract, it will be stimulated by the nervous system. It is not autorhythmic. Smooth muscle is what makes up the walls of a lot of our organs. We're going to see a lot of times you're going to have if this was the tube, you're going to a lot of times have an inner circular and an outer longitudinal layer doing something like that. You're going to have these 2 layers around it, and it's that alternating contractions of those 2 types that can give you that peristalsis, kind of like this, like a really bad dance move that moves the food or whatever else through that particular organ. These cells, like I said before, are spindle-shaped. You can see down here, wider at the center, centralized nucleus, tapering on the ends, means they fit together in a real nice sheet. There is actin and myosin present, just like in the other ones here, but they're not layered this way. They're going in a lot of different directions. Because of that, you don't get these striations. And we're going to see that these filaments are attached to the sides of this a little bit different. We'll look at that towards the end of this when we look at how smooth muscle contracts, but we're going to see you have a lot of these attaching to different fibers at areas called dense bodies or to the cell membrane. So this cell will get narrower as well as shorter, unlike skeletal muscle fibers, which tend to just get shorter, but they don't also get narrower. And again, found in the walls of a lot of these organs, involuntary movement, spindle-shaped cells, again, can sometimes look like dense regular connective tissue, but again, should have all these centralized nuclei that help you tell this apart. And what is muscles doing? In and of themselves, the main thing that they're doing is they're generating movement. So it can be moving your parts of your body, moving blood through you, moving lymph through you, moving food through you, moving urine, semen, baby. Again, lots of different types of movement, either you through the environment or stuff through you. That is the main thing they're doing. The other thing these help to do is help to maintain posture. So some muscles are always partially contracted. That helps you hold your head upright. A lot of times when you sleep, you lose that postural contraction, and that's why if you fall asleep in class, you'll start doing that head drop like that. When muscles contract, they do also generate heat. It is one of the ways that we are warm-blooded and that our muscles are generating some heat along with our metabolism that is generating some heat here. So they do help maintain our body temperature. We can see that definitely when we start shivering. And then finally, these do, again, as I was saying in the joint chapter, help stabilize the joints, which is part of the reason if you get damage to a particular joint, like the shoulder joint, a lot of times you'll try to strengthen the muscle around that joint to help make up for some of the damage to that particular joint. And again, all the things that muscles do will fall into one of these categories. So those are the functions of muscle. Characteristics of muscle, we're going to see these ones start getting a little bit more interesting, and we'll get into excitability a little bit more. But muscles are excitable. What this means is you can give them a stimulus and they respond to it. Not that you can just say boo and they jump. But the main thing here is we can give a signal to the muscle and we can cause something about that muscle to change. So that's what we mean by excitable. We're going to see in a little bit here, this is a change in electrical potential within the muscle. We can generate a muscle impulse is what we'll see by delivering a neurotransmitter to this muscle. But the fact that we can release a neurotransmitter and the muscle responds is what we mean to call it excitable. Muscle is also contractile. It is the defining property of muscle. You stimulate it, it gets shorter. The actin and myosin move past one another, the overall muscle gets shorter. That is contractility. Muscle is also conductive, meaning that we can generate an electrical change in that muscle that can travel out throughout the whole muscle cell. So it can conduct this electrical activity throughout the entire cell. To me, those are the first three are the ones that really make muscle truly what it is. And we'll talk about each of these things in a little bit as we go through how muscles contract and the whole process involved with that. The other important thing of muscles is if one of those antagonistic pairs is contracting, muscle is extensible, meaning the other muscle, the antagonistic pair, opposite the one being contracted, can extend. It can stretch out. The other thing is there's enough elastic tissue in here that when you stretch it out, it can return to its same length. So muscles are extensible, they are also elastic. And these are both things that let muscles do their job in terms of contracting, responding to that stimulus, and bringing about something like a flexion of the muscle. So that is this one here. What we'll go into next time is a lot of the anatomy overall, gross anatomy of a muscle, as well as some of the microanatomy of muscles. It's going to seem like there's a lot of names. All these are going to be important to us as we get into how muscles actually go about contracting. So I will see you again next time.